Hello, this is Mr. Wartsky again, and today we are going to start our wonderful journey through the immune system. Now remember to always pause if you need to, and if you have any questions, read your textbook, watch the video over again, or ask me in class tomorrow. So we're going to start with the introduction, saying that the immune system is a homeostatic system which allows us to maintain our balance. And with all homeostatic systems, we need to review negative feedback. When the stimulus creates a response that reduces the stimulus, like a hungry baby, when it's hungry, it cries. That's our stimulus to feed it, which reduces the stimulus, which is crying. Now, positive feedback is when a stimulus creates a response that increases the stimulus. So if the baby is wet instead of hungry, it will cry. We will try to feed it. It will cry louder, which will frustrate us a little bit more until we realize that we were wrong in our initial assumption. Now, usually, negative feedback is healthy and positive feedback is unhealthy. However, in the immune system, positive feedback allows us to fight off our invaders. So let's talk about the line of defenses. Now, the immune system is one of the three, or one of the lines of defenses that we have. The first line of defense, we are going to prevent things from getting into our bodies, and these are known as non-specific external defenses. So before it gets inside, we want to protect ourselves. We want to block everything from getting inside of us and making us sick. So the first line of defense is our external barrier, and that's skin and mucous membranes. Now, skin, the bacteria and viruses usually can't enter because the skin cells are filled with keratin. That's really tough. They're dead cells on top, and they're held together by tight junctions, so things can't get between the cells. So it's great. The pH of skin due to sweat and oil is slightly acidic from 3 to 5, and the hair provides protection against abrasions and may help us notice that things are crawling on our skin. Because, you know, when the hairs on your arm or something move, you look down all the time and try to smack it away. Well, that's what hair does. It's very sensitive. So now we also have good bacteria on our skin, anywhere from 100,000 bacteria per square centimeter of skin. Yes, and that protects us because it prevents bad bacteria from landing on top of our skin. Now, there are openings that in our body, our digestive system, our excretory system, and our reproductive system that can allow organisms into our body, but those things are lined with mucus. They also have ciliated cells. Our digestive system has stomach acid, which is a pH of like 1.2 or 2.2 to 1.7 to 2.2. That can kill almost anything. We have a very acidic environment in the vagina because of lactic acid. We can talk about that later. And then we have saliva, which contains enzymes, lysozymes, right? So we have ways of killing invaders even in our openings to the external environment. So there's skin, there's the epidermis up here, and this is a layer, dead skin cells connected by tight junctions. They have filled with keratin, which is a tough protein. Yep. And here's in our respiratory system specifically, we have these ciliated cells that can push things up our respiratory system and then down our digestive system. We also have goblet cells that produce mucus, which can trap viruses and bacteria. So let's say that something gets inside of our bodies. Okay, good. So we have a non-specific internal defense system, and we have a number of them. The first line of our non-specific internal defense are phagocytes. Now, there are two types of phagocytes. We have cell eaters, and then we have cells that poke holes in other cells. So what they end up doing is they end up squeezing out of our blood vessels through the capillaries and into tissues. They move by chemotaxis. So they move to the higher concentration of invaders, and they will engulf, or they will produce, I should say, produce perforin, which is an enzyme that pokes holes in the cell membrane. So they either engulf and take in, or poke a hole and let it leak out. We have the main ones. There are 5 main ones. We have neutrophils, which is anywhere from 60 to 70% of white blood cells. These are the first on the scene. After they eat 25 bacteria, they die. Now, too many dead neutrophils, that's pus. That's when you have a lot of bacteria down there. You have a lot of dead neutrophils. Monocytes, about 5% of the white blood cells, are in your blood vessels and they circle around. And once they move into tissues, they turn into macrophages, and that is my abbreviation for macrophages with M5. Now, macrophages are super cell eaters. They live for a long time. They will engulf and take in and eat invaders. So they are cell eaters. So neutrophils and macrophages, cell eaters. Eosinophils, 1.5% of the circulating white blood cells, they defend against large parasites like your ringworms and maybe some funguses. And what they'll do is get on top and then start poking holes in them, and hopefully they'll kill them with all the holes that they poke in them. And then we have natural killer cells. And natural killer cells will kill our own infected cells, or they kill cancer cells. And they do this by poking holes with perforin. They poke holes, poke holes, poke holes. So here are the different types of phagocytes down here. We have the macrophages, beautiful monocytes chain into macrophages. We have the eosinophils, we have the neutrophils, natural killer cells. So the gang is all here. I know there's a lot more, and we'll talk about these things right here. So hopefully get most of these cells talked about. In basophils, we'll talk about them. The mast cells there. Yep, right there. We'll talk about all these cells eventually. Oh, what a great deal. So phagocytosis is how they surround, and they take in, and they eat the invaders. Those are macrophages. So the second line of our nonspecific internal defense is inflammation. So physical damage can trigger an inflammatory response. We have these cells called mast cells in the tissue that will break open when damaged, and when they break open, they release something known as histamine. Histamine acts as a chemical signal to white blood cells. Histamine also causes the blood vessels to dilate. This vasodilation, blood vessels dilating is vasodilation, will increase the blood flow to the area and becomes red and hot because blood is hot. The dilated capillaries are more permeable and more fluid will enter the tissue. Now, as the fluid enters the tissue, white blood cells are brought there. That's where your swelling comes into play. So how do you get rid of swelling? You take an antihistamine against histamine. White blood cells, when they get to the tissue, release prostaglandins, which promote blood flow to the area and can act as another chemical signal. Now, cells in the damaged blood vessels will release a chemokine, another signal, which will stimulate fibroblasts, and you can start forming scar tissue. So there are three chemical signals: histamine, prostaglandins, and chemokine. And that's how the white blood cells know where to go. And here's inflammation, the white blood cells flowing out in the capillary, moving into the area. These are neutrophils and macrophages eating the bacteria that are here. The mast cells are releasing histamine, which are causing the vasodilation there. Platelets, we might get to it. Those are the things that help with blood clotting. So what is another non-specific internal defense? Fevers. So your normal body temperature is 37.2 degrees Celsius or about 99 degrees Fahrenheit. The hypothalamus is going to maintain that body temperature because the hypothalamus is the boss. It is the big boss. It takes care of us. Now, damaged white blood cells release prostaglandin. We know that. The pathogen may also release a toxin. Now, the pathogen plus toxin may stimulate the macrophages to release pyrogen. Now, pyrogen will reset the body's thermostat in the hypothalamus. Bacterial toxins and antibody-antigen complexes can also act as pyrogens and cause the hypothalamus to readjust your body thermostat. So a fever can be helpful. Why? Because if you increase your body temperature by 1 degree Celsius, you will increase the metabolic rate, how well you produce energy and how fast things move, by 10%. You can increase enzyme reactions. You have your cells move faster. You will have a faster immune response with a slight fever. However, if the temperature gets too high, proteins can denature. That's about 108 degrees. Now, aspirin will inhibit prostaglandin, which is one of the first steps up here. And if you inhibit prostaglandins, guess what? You stop a fever. And here's your pathogenesis of a fever. All these things produce the pyrogen, which will go up there and affect the hypothalamus. Your third line of defense, so let's say it gets into your body, it gets past the line of defense, the first non-specific line of defense. So what is our third line of defense? That is your immune system. Yep. So specific internal, you are going to produce antibodies. So of course, we need to know something about antibodies. You produce specific antibodies for specific pathogens. An antigen from now on will be Ag, will stimulate an antibody or AB response. Okay, so we're going to draw a picture of an antibody on the next slide. But there are 5 classes of antibodies depending on the constant region. There's immunoglobulin or Ig, that's short for immunoglobulin G, IgM, IgA, IgD, and IgE. Now, IgG, IgD, and IgE all look very similar to each other, but the IgGs are free-floating, the IgDs are on B cells, and the IgEs are on mast cells. Now, antibodies bind to a specific region on the antigen, and that is called an epitope. So on one antigen, there can be many different epitopes where different antibodies bind. So here is a picture of the different classes of antibodies. Over here we have the variable region. The constant region is down here. And then we have the light chain and the heavy chain. Notice that IgG, IgE, and IgD are all very similar in their appearance. IgM, we have 5 IgGs together. And in IgA, we have 2 IgGs together. Now remind me in class and we'll go over the picture of the antibody again. So there are 2 types of immunity. There's passive and active. Now passive immunity is when you get the immunity from someone. Naturally, you get antibodies from mom when you are nursing. The first couple of days you get the colostrum, which is all proteins. You get an antibody shake, which helps protect you from the environment that you are now in. Artificially, you can get IgG antibodies if you're exposed to specifically hepatitis. So that is artificial. Active immunity is when you fight off the disease yourself. That's natural. And artificial, you get vaccines where they inject part of the pathogen or a weakened pathogen into you, and you build up your own antibodies, but you are given that pathogen artificially. The humoral and cell-mediated immunity, humoral, you produce antibodies to get the antigens that have not gotten into the cells yet. And in order to do that, you need B cells, T helper cells, and macrophages. Where the cell-mediated response is when the cell has already become infected and now you need to kill the cell to get rid of the pathogens, and that occurs with TC cells or cytotoxic T cells. Well, that's going to be it for today. If you have any questions, by all means, watch the video again, read your textbook, or talk to me tomorrow. And please remind me about the antibody picture in class tomorrow. Have a good night.